There exists in our society a substantial group of people who are actually struggling to just live. We don't see them, but it doesn't mean that they don't exist. The people that we help at LSPPS, they are usually poor, they are vulnerable, they may be isolated, marginalized, and because of their circumstances, they just don't have that same chance of fighting and representing themselves in the legal system. You are literally like their lifeline. I was representing a woman who was pending her trial. She actually had some family members who were willing to bail her out, meaning she could still be outside of prison while waiting for her trial. And she told me that she didn't want to explore that option because for the first time in her life, she didn't have to worry about rent, about putting food on the table for the rest of her family. She felt at peace. Can you imagine a life where you would rather be remanded in prison than to be outside? But there are people living amongst us that would rather die than have a chance at living because they don't have better alternatives. I once acted for a man who was accused of drug trafficking. He was facing the death penalty, but what we could do was to run the defense that only a small part of the heroin found in his house was meant to be trafficked, small enough to not attract the death penalty. But he just wanted to claim he didn't know that the substances found in his house were drugs, even though he had already admitted to the police that he knew it was drugs. Even though we repeatedly told him what the likely outcome of that decision was going to be, that it would result in him hanging, he persisted. My team and I, we told him that we couldn't run that defense, knowing what the truth was. And he told me that he knew that it was a suicidal defense, and he said, I would rather hang than die in prison. Because the alternative would mean that he would be in prison for a really long time, and he was already in his 50s. So that was our last conversation with him, and then we parted ways. Didn't agree, and I don't agree with his decision. It just goes against, everything you know as a lawyer. But, listening to his life story, it just felt like he never really had a chance for a better life as well. He never had much education, dropped out in primary school. He started using drugs from a very, very young age. He told me he never had friends, he never had a girlfriend, he grew up in a single flat with 11 other siblings, and he was bullied all his life because he was physically deformed, and drugs to him was a way of escaping. It is only when you are in the same room with them, listening to them, and really, feeling the real pain that they are in, that was when I realized that, oh wow, what separates us actually is not just that glass in between us, but whatever life has thrown our way. What I often realize about my clients is that their legal problem doesn't exist in a vacuum. Some of them steal because they are poor and they just cannot find good employment. Some of them are repeated drug offenders because they never managed to get help for their addictions, or they just never managed to solve that problem which keeps leading them to relapse. What we try to do is to not just resolve our clients' legal issues, but to also point them in the right direction, connect them with psychiatrists, with counselors, so that they can get that root cause treated as well. A lot of the people that I help often have nobody else to turn to, and because they have just been thrust into very, very difficult situations. Sometimes I think them knowing that someone is on their team, speaking for them, listening to their problems and understanding what they're going through is already a very big help.